All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started, and folks can join as they're able to log on. My name is Marcy Henson. I'm the director of the Department of Environment and Sustainability for Clark County. I want to welcome you all to our first meeting of the Transportation Electrification Working Group. So next slide, please. Today we're going to, it's going to be a pretty light day in terms of background of the role of the working group and a little bit of basics about electric vehicles and the grid, and then what sort of discussions we have in front of us and what the expected outcomes are. And then as we progress through the next year, we'll get into a little bit more meaty, substantive issues. So we're going to focus on introductions today, discuss the working group role and expected outcomes of what we're working on together, give you all some basics about electric vehicles and the energy grid. We're going to talk about our goals related to air quality and greenhouse gas emission reduction goals, and then also just in general transportation electrification goals and why we're interested in that. We'll do a question and answer towards the end and then talk about next steps for our meeting in January. All right, next slide. So for introductions, we're going to have the members introduce themselves. I'll call on the organization, and if the person here representing the organization can introduce yourself, your name, and the organization you're with, we'd appreciate it. Just a little bit on the purpose of this working group and the purpose of the membership. We invited units of local government to participate, as these agencies have interest, responsibility, and expertise in transportation, energy, planning, and development, and can be helpful to informing a regional strategy on how we might go about electrifying transportation. We've also invited a number of non-governmental organizations who have particular interest or expertise and would be affected stakeholders by the work that we do together over the next year. And then we also have interested parties that we're keeping a list of so that they can be participating in this process, tracking our discussions, participating in the meetings, and then also receiving meeting materials and being offered opportunities to provide comments as we work on analysis and recommendations that come out of this group. So for the members, like I said, I'm going to call on the name of the organization, and if the person representing can introduce themselves, that would be great. So CHISPA. Is there a representative from CHISPA? All right. How about the City of Henderson?
Yes, Andrew Rother, I'm the Acting Assistant Director of Community Development Services here representing the City of Henderson. I know our director, Lisa Crowder, is going to join us, but I don't think she's jumped on yet.
Great.
Thank you, Marcy.
City of Las Vegas.
Hi, Marcy. Hi, everyone. Marco Vallata, City of Las Vegas. With Planning Department, we're actually going to be reorganizing next year under Community Development, which will absorb the Building and Safety Department. So we'll have planning and building all under one unit going forward. And we would, of course, be responsible for zoning as well as permitting and all the functions that we have today under one house. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Marco. Clark County School District.
Good afternoon, this is Mark Campbell. I'm here with Clark County School District. I'm the Director of Sustainability, Energy, and Environmental Services. And I work very closely with our transportation group. So between us and them, we will be active in this organization. Thank you.
Thank you. The Electrification Coalition.
Hey, this is Will Dreyer, Senior Policy Analyst for the Electrification Coalition. I work on our policy team. We've also got a programs and implementation team. My colleague, Jared Walker, is not on the call today, but he will probably join some future calls as well.
Great, thank you. NAIOP.
Hi, Marcy. This is Rod Martin. NAIOP is a volunteer organization comprised of commercial real estate professionals. I'm a board member of NAIOP, also an industrial developer here in Las Vegas. So our interest would be to represent the commercial real estate development industry.
Great. NV Energy.
Good morning, this is Marie Steele. I'm the Vice President of Electrification and Energy Services, and we're looking forward to the conversation.
Ovation Development. Is Mr. Mulaski able to join us yet? He was coming in on international travel, so we promised to catch him up if he was a little jet lagged. All right, Regional Transportation Commission.
I'm Ray Lathrop. I'm the manager of regional planning in the Regional Transportation Commission, and I'm in the Department of Metropolitan Planning Organization.
Southern Nevada Water Authority.
Hi, I'm Keely Brooks. I'm the Climate Change Policy Analyst for the Southern Nevada Water Authority. I'm in the Water Resources Division or Department, but I'm also going to be working closely with our head of our fleet division in order to help provide some information to this group. And because we have about 600, I think, vehicles at any given time. So I'm excited to be part of these conversations.
Great, thank you. Southern Nevada Home Builders Association.
I think that's me, Matt Walker. I'm with the Howard Hughes Corporation, master developer of Summerlin, and thankful for the opportunity to listen in.
Thanks, Matt. So I know we've got some participants from the state as well. State of Nevada Division of Environmental or Department of Environmental Protection.
Hi, Marcy. Everyone, Greg Lovato, Administrator of NDEP. Glad to be joining. Thanks.
And then out of the Governor's Office, the Nevada Climate Initiative.
Hi, I'm Kristen Averett. I'm the Senior Climate Advisor in the Governor's Office.
And then the Governor's Office of Energy. Anyone able to join us? Okay. And I know NDOT was going to be able to participate today. So Southwest Energy Efficiency Project.
Marcy, this is Angie Dykema. I'm representing SPEAK as their Nevada representative.
Great, thank you, Angie. And then last but not least, Western Resources Advocates.
Thanks, Marcy. This is Aaron Kressig with WRA. I'm leading our transportation electrification work for the organization and looking forward to participating.
All right, thank you. Well, we appreciate all of you who are formally serving as members. And next slide. We're going to take an opportunity to, if you're an interested party, would you please list your name, title, and organization in the chat? And then throughout our meeting today, we'll be using the chat to pose questions. And we've reserved time at the end of the meeting to do questions and answers. So if you're an interested party, please go ahead and take an opportunity to introduce yourself in the chat, your name, title, and the organization that you're representing. All right, so for the working group role and expected outcomes, what we're really focused on is providing an organized way in which we can develop, coordinate, and implement local programs and strategies to support transportation electrification in Southern Nevada. And we'd like to do that in an equitable manner, which is reflected in the membership of the working group. Our focus at first will be on transforming the passenger and light duty transportation sector, really leveraging the experience of all of us on working on both our organizational fleets, but then really focused on the public fleet as well. And we're going to talk a little bit about why we're focused on those things. In the future, we may focus on medium and heavy duty vehicles, transportation network companies as well, but it's a pretty big chunk to bite off to talk about passenger light duty vehicles to start with. This forum will also provide us an opportunity to increase our community's literacy and competency about vehicle electrification and transportation electrification, what charging infrastructure exists and is necessary. And it'll also inform us when we're engaging with the PUC on potential opportunities to influence policy in their processes as well. And then it also affords us an opportunity to really understand the costs and benefits of transportation electrification here in Southern Nevada. Finally, it provides us an opportunity to organize and to envision large transportation electrification projects that can benefit from money that's being made available both in the infrastructure bill and potentially also the Build Back Better bill. So to get us started, we're going to talk a little bit about emission reduction goals. that we have here locally and at the state. So we are aligning with the Nevada Climate Initiative and intend to help the state of Nevada meet their goals. We're the most populous county in the state of Nevada, and so it's imperative that we do our part to help the state meet those emission reduction goals. So they have a goal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions 28% by 2025, starting at 2005 levels, 45% by 2030, and then to get to net zero by 2050. And you all have probably seen that there's a ton of activity around these goals at the local level, counties, cities, states, and then also at the federal level. And the pace of this is moving pretty quickly right now. So in fact, yesterday it was announced that the federal government intends to stop buying gasoline vehicles by 2035. So it's a really good time for us to be talking about these things and to get focused on these goals. Next slide. So talk a little bit about why we're focusing on passenger vehicles and transportation in general. The county and many of you who are participating in the meeting today have been helping us with this regional greenhouse gas emissions inventory. So we've been looking at what are the sources of greenhouse gas emissions here in Southern Nevada across the region. And the results of that really help emphasize why we're interested in influencing transportation emissions. So our region transportation accounts for more than 1/3 of all greenhouse gas emissions. And so this slide here is showing what that's composed of. And so as you can see, the on-road transportation, so those are the vehicles that are actually on road, 19.6% of those emissions are coming from gasoline powered vehicles. So when we're prioritizing sources of emissions and what we can influence, transportation ends up at the very top of the list. Next slide. And then of those emissions, the reason why we're focused on light duty first is because they encompass 23% of all GHGs. Well, that's the regional statistic. 50% of those emissions are passenger vehicles. And so that's why we're starting there. It's really where we can get the biggest bang for our buck. So 43% of those are from light duty, and then 6% are light duty trucks, 6% from medium heavy duty. So hence sort of the future phases that we're talking about on those light duty trucks, medium and heavy duty trucks. From an air quality perspective, which is another hat our department wears, particulate matter 2.5 or PM 2.5 that mostly comes from combustion is a regulated pollutant. And transportation emissions accounts for 7% of our region's particulate matter 2.5 emissions, 39% of nitrogen oxides, and 21% of all volatile organic chemicals. And those last two components together form ozone. And really, we really struggle with ozone as a pollutant here from about May through September. And that it's pretty highly influenced by emissions from transportation. So that really gives you some context as to why we're so focused on electrifying transportation. Next slide. So some of the goals that Clark County has obviously is to come into compliance with all of the regulated pollutant standards under the Clean Air Act. So improving our air quality, improving public health. The reason why those pollutants are regulated at the federal level is because they can really wreak havoc on our respiratory systems, our cardiovascular systems. So the cleaner the air, the healthier we all are. And then also reducing greenhouse gas emissions so that we can reduce our contributions to climate change and start to mitigate the impacts that we're already experiencing. So in order to accomplish those goals, we need to reduce our car dependency, work with folks like the Regional Transportation Commission on increasing people's use of transit, expanding transit, increasing all mobility options, work towards getting people out of their cars in general, focus on more active transportation. Again, we've been working really closely with the Regional Transportation Commission. They've been doing great work helping identify how we can do that as a community. And then finally, electrifying transportation. We are a community that culturally we like our cars. It is sort of our primary way of getting around town. And so if we want to see those emissions be reduced, we need to really work on transforming that passenger fleet. And again, all with the goal of trying to get to net zero GHG emissions by 2050. Next slide. So the working group is going to hopefully help us develop a regional transportation electrification strategy. And this really feeds into Clark County's all-in climate action initiative. And so we're focusing on a variety of planning sectors there. And again, because of the emissions associated with transportation, working in this sector is really a primary goal of ours. As I mentioned, the phase 1 will be to focus on light duty vehicles, and then subsequent phases will focus on medium and heavy duty vehicles. Next slide. All right, now I'm going to turn it over to April.
All right, thank you so much. My name is April Bolduc, and I'm president of S-Curve Strategies, and we are working with the county to help implement your regional plan, and specifically around transportation electrification. And I have my colleague Randy Shimka here. You're going to hear from him in a minute. He's the Transportation Electrification Technical Solutions Advisor. And our company really focuses on transportation electrification program development for utilities, states, and municipalities. And we've actually been doing this since about 2011, developing EV driver programs for local utility, and then also stakeholder engagements around this. And then with S-Curve Strategies really working in at least 12 different states over the last 4 years on transportation electrification efforts. And I think one thing that's really important before I have you introduce yourself, Randy, is that the two of us have actually been driving electric since 2011. And so we have real world experience of what it's like, the struggles, kind of the barriers to adoption. I know with Randy taking trips across the US, he has literally seen it all. So Randy, I'll turn it over to you for your introduction.
All right. Well, thank you very much, April. My name is Randy Shimka, as April mentioned. I have 10 years of clean transportation experience, specializing in charging solutions and helping people get the most out of their cars. I've been a witness for a utility on a couple of different applications, getting some funding for EV charging installations, and very passionate about EVs. And as April mentioned, we love to take road trips. I've seen just about every charging scenario and have a lot of great ideas, I think, about charging solutions that I'd like to bring to the project here, and I'm glad to participate today. So thanks for having me.
Great. Thanks so much, Randy. So now we'll just go ahead and jump right into EVs and charging. And Randy, why don't you go ahead and take that away?
Okay, very good. Thank you. We have a few slides here to educate the group a little bit about some of our EV topics. And I know there's a wide range of knowledge base in the group, from expert all the way to beginner. So we'll start with some of the beginning topics today. You see the topics here: the vehicle types, charging power versus energy, efficiency of the cars, and charging basics, the 3 types of charging, and costs. How much does it cost to charge your EV? So we'll get started here on this first slide with vehicle types. Looks like we have to go back just one, right?
Yep.
Okay, vehicle type. So I've got a little a table here set up to show the different types of cars. And of course, the conventional gasoline or internal combustion engine ICE car there is at the top with its gas can next to it, cars that we've all owned over the years. And then going down the page here, you probably recognize the early model Prius, a hybrid vehicle that Toyota made, a great car. So it runs on gasoline as well, but it has batteries that the car charges while it moves. And I think for the most part, it charges those batteries going downhill, for example, and it uses those batteries to propel the car. You shuts off the engine at intersections, for example, and starts the car off at low speeds on those batteries, and then restarts the engine and gets pretty good mileage that way. And then within the blue shaded box, these are the 2 types of plug-in electric vehicles, or PEV, if you've heard that acronym. So the upper one is a plug-in hybrid vehicle, which some people pronounce PHEV. It's a little bit of an awkward acronym there, but it also has a gasoline engine and batteries. And so the range on the electric battery for this type of a car is anywhere from, say, 10 miles up to maybe 50 miles, cars like a Chevy Volt, for example. So it runs on the battery. And then when that battery gets to be exhausted, then the gasoline engine starts up, and you have basically a tank of gas to go the rest of the trip that you're on in that car. So that makes people feel better. You have some electric for some range, some battery, and then you have the gasoline fuel that you can use. And then the bottom one which is my favorite, of course, the battery electric vehicle, or BEV, which is all battery, no gasoline engine, and you charge the car and drive it. You know, when those cars were first sold in around 2011 with the current generation of cars, they had ranges of, 60, 70, 80 miles perhaps. And now with the advancements that have been made in battery technology and just larger batteries in general being put into cars, their cars are being sold now that are all battery like this, that have 200, 300, 350 miles. So really helps to eliminate that range anxiety that people might have. All right, so that's a summary of the different car types. We'll switch over here to the next slide. And I think we have to go back one, right? Let's see. There's the power versus energy slide. There we go. So this is just a real basic slide here to make the point about the difference between power and energy. If you've heard of these terms, you probably already understand it. But for those that haven't heard, power is an instantaneous measurement. So it's usually in watts, or kilowatts would be 1,000 watts. And it has to do with the current times the voltage on an instantaneous basis. So power is important when we set up charging station installations, because we have to size all of the infrastructure based on that power that's going to be available to charge cars. But energy, the next bullet item down, that is power over a period of time. So for example, 1 kilowatt hour would be 1,000 watts for 1 hour. Or it could be 500 watts for 2 hours, anything that multiplies up to that 1,000 number. And so drivers become very familiar with kilowatt hours, because that has to do with charging your car and how much you pay for that energy from the utility, because the utilities, of course, sell electricity in energy units, such as kilowatt hours. And so the takeaway point here that we have at the bottom is, I have a Nissan Leaf with a 40 kilowatt hour battery. And if the local utility charges 5 cents per kilowatt hour during that midnight hour time frame, it would cost about $2 for me to fully charge my car if it was empty. And of course, a lot of times it's not quite all the way empty, but not very much money as compared to a gas car. Okay, next slide. Now we'll go back to the efficiency number here. So the purpose of this slide is to really make the point about an average efficiency for EVs. And roughly, the average car will go about 3 miles using 1 kilowatt hour of energy. So as you get a more efficient car, or maybe a lighter weight car, a smaller car, maybe you can get that up to 4 miles per kilowatt hour. Or if you have a larger, heavier car, maybe a little bit less than 3, maybe down to 2, 2.5 to 3 miles per kilowatt hour. And just like gasoline cars, lead foot behavior definitely reduces efficiency. And it's so much fun to drive these cars that it's really easy to get that lead foot going and enjoy that instant torque that an electric vehicle provides. So here's an example. Our takeaway point at the bottom is, my Tesla Model 3 might have an 82 kilowatt hour battery. And if I'm efficient with my driving at 4 miles per kilowatt hour, then I can drive perhaps up to 328 miles on a full charge. Other things affect the distance you can go as far as hills or weather and so forth, but that's just a general calculation. Okay, so now we're going to talk about EV charging basics. So there's basically 3 ways to charge a car. I will go over them each briefly here. So level 1 is the simplest type of charging, because the manufacturers give you a cord set that comes with all the different models of cars that you can plug into a standard 120 volt receptacle or outlet in your garage. So you don't get as fast of a charge with this method as you do with the other 2 ways, but you can still get, 4 to 5 miles per hour of charging. And it's usually plenty of charge for the average commuter if you plug it in at night and perhaps set the timer to kick off at 10 or 11 p.m. and then charged all the way through the night. By the time you're ready to drive the car out the next morning, you can pick up quite a few miles that way. And it does work for a lot of people. And you don't really need to have an expensive charging station installed if you can charge with this method. Some people get a little bit impatient with level 1 charging, but it can do the job quite a bit. And I think that April is a good example. She's been using level 1 charging at her place for her car, and it works fine. All right, so now we'll switch over to level 2 charging. And this is a faster way of charging. And mainly the reason why it's faster is because the voltage is higher. So instead of a 120 volt receptacle, this would be, say, a 240 volt situation in a single family home, and either done with a portable cord set, or you might have a charging station installed on the wall. But either way, whether you have the cord set, the receptacle, or a charging station on the wall, this usually requires an EV charging installation setup, by a certified electrician. You might be lucky enough to have a dryer outlet or a welding outlet or something in the garage that you might be able to use, but most people would require some kind of a charging installation there. So, of course, the advantage of level 2 charging is, as the takeaway point at the bottom says, that you can do multiple trips in one day and not have to worry about level 1 making up those the miles there. And if you have a longer commute, then certainly you probably want to think about a level 2 charging station to make that a little bit easier. Okay, next slide. And just to give you an idea about power levels here in the home, something that you may not have really thought of is, in many cases, when you put in a level 2 charging setup in the garage, it can be the highest power consuming device in the home. You can see by the chart here that level 1 chargers, they would insert themselves right there by the hair dryer, between the microwave and the hair dryer. About 1.4 kW would be the power rating for level 1. And then as you step up the illustration there between oven and home air conditioner and dryer, level 2 can be all the way up to 19 kW depending on the car and the current level. So that gives you a good idea that you can charge the car a little bit with level 1, or you can charge it faster with level 2. Okay, we'll switch to the next slide and talk about DC fast chargers. So DC fast chargers are really amazing. You can charge maybe as much as 200 miles into the car in as little as 30 minutes, but there are some caveats there. This is usually something that can't be done in the home because the type of power is not really available in the home for this. So it's generally a public or a fleet charging situation that you would see DC fast charging in, and the car has to have a DC fast charging port in order to use this kind of charging. And they were perhaps a little bit more scarce in the earlier days, but they're becoming a little bit more common with today's cars. Sometimes they're an option that you have to pay for, and sometimes they're included with the car. But if you're interested in that for road trips and so forth, it's really great to have that DC fast charging port. And so there are 3 different types of DC fast charging connectors based on the type of car and the situation that you're in. So Tesla started their own type of charger many years ago. And then there's a Japanese standard called CHAdeMO. And then there's also a Society of Automotive Engineers standard, which is called CCS, or Combined Charging System. And that is becoming more popular and more common these days. And there are many stations out there that actually have 1 or more of these cords hanging from them. So you'll have to realize what kind of a charging connector your car would require, and then use an application like PlugShare to seek out those type of chargers. So in some places, in some states, the charging companies are able to bill by the kilowatt hour, by energy, but in some states, in some areas, they can't do that, and they have to bill per minute. So you'll have to look at the site where you want to charge and determine how they're doing the billing. And just as a point of interest here, the DC fast chargers actually charge faster when the battery is lower. So when you pull into a charging station, the charging speed will be very fast, but as the battery starts to fill up and also heat up, then the charging speed tapers off. So that's normal behavior, and it takes about as much time to go from, say, 25 to 80% as it does to go from 80 to 100. So you're better off to disconnect at 80% and just keep going to the next station. And we've done a lot of road trips this way, traveling across the country. And there's a lot of apps that you can use on your phone for charging stations. And you can also look at the screen in your car to get information that way. So it's very fun to take trips. Okay, so how much does it cost to charge an EV at home? I grabbed this graphic off of the NV Energy website. And so they have a time of use rate for electric vehicle owners. And I chose kind of a worst case scenario graph. There's 3 different graphs that they show, but this one shows that there's an on-peak price during the summer from 1 to 7 p.m. of 35 cents per kilowatt hour. So you probably want to try to avoid that and go for the midnight hour, the 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. Price of 5 cents per kilowatt hour. And most all the cars now come with a timer. So you can set the timer, plug it in when you get home, and then have the car kick off the charge at say 10 p.m. and enjoy that 5 cent energy. And so the next slide, we have a little page that shows the calculation about how much it would cost. So I made some assumptions here based on the Nevada scene, did some looking up, and Nevada commuters are about 9,000 miles per year. And we're going to use that average efficiency of 3 miles per kilowatt hour. And the nationwide average for a gasoline car is about 25 miles per gallon. The 5 cent price for energy per kilowatt hour. And I looked up on Gas Buddy, and it looks like Las Vegas gas prices are about $3.50 per gallon these days. So taking all that information and putting it into the equation here on the EV side, it would be 9,000 miles divided by 3 miles per kilowatt hour, which is 3,000 kilowatt hours annually, times the 5 cent price, which means you would pay about $150 annually to fuel the car. And when you divide that out by the number of miles, it's about 1.6 cents per mile, not too bad at all. And then on the gasoline side, 9,000 miles divided by 25 miles per gallon is 360 gallons, and then times the fuel price, about $1,260 for annual fuel costs there, which works out to be about 14 cents per mile. So quite a difference. If you can use that 5 cent energy, you can have quite a bit of savings when you're charging your EV. So a lot of things, of course, that you don't have to do with an EV, as we've listed here in the blue takeaway point. No smog checks, the quarterly oil changes, all the maintenance is reduced because the EVs have a lot fewer moving parts and so forth. So there's my points for today. April, I'll hand it back to you, and we'll keep on moving.
All right. I think I'm going to bring Randy with.
Thank you so much. And so now we're so excited because we have Marie Steele here, and I am going to stop sharing my screen so that she can share her screen and talk about an energy grid overview. So thanks so much, Marie.
Of course. Oh, wrong one. Hold on. That's the problem with having too many things open. That is, or can you, hold on. I'm sorry, guys. I'm going to close everything else. Let's try this one more time. Nope.
We can see your full screen.
Practice. Hold on.
We can see the screen.
Can you see the?
Yeah, we can see the PowerPoint, and then if you just click it into presentation mode. Yeah, there you go.
Perfect. That is not what I see, but I'll go with it. First off,
yeah,
thank you. And I think I'm going to take Randy with me everywhere from here on out to give my intros on explaining the tariffs. First off, obviously, again, Marie Steele with NV Energy. Most of you know me very well here in Southern Nevada, and we've had great partnerships in advancing transportation electrification along the years. So today we are going to, is that on the agenda slide now? Perhaps?
It is not.
How about now?
Here we go.
All right.
Yes.
So, you think I'm done with the pandemic and the technology fails? Thank you for all bearing with me. So today, an energy grid overview is how we prefaced it, but I do want to take the time also to talk about our current electric vehicle programs, some specific Nevada market research, especially here in Southern Nevada as well, how we think about electric vehicle planning. So as Randy pointed out, it's not just charging infrastructure, it is also the power, the energy, and the energy infrastructure behind it and how we plan for it. And then as well, just give an update to everybody on Senate Bill 448, the two transportation electrification plans that will really help to accelerate transportation electrification here in Southern Nevada. And honestly, you know, using this working group as a great point of stakeholder engagement, I'm really excited for it and super thankful for the county holding this group as well. So just so everybody knows, NV Energy has been long engaged in electric vehicle programs. So that time of use rate that Randy talked about started in about 2009. So we've really seen the opportunity of shifting electric vehicle load off peak for quite some time. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, about why that makes sense, because not everybody understands about peak or off peak and all these sorts of things. So, you know, helping to understand that here in a second. But from an infrastructure perspective, in 2013, we had the Charging Station Shared Investment Program, and that's in partnership with almost everybody on this call. So that was the expansion of Level 2 charging here in Nevada, which actually at the time provided for free electric vehicle charging for that first 5 years. So providing that charging infrastructure network to provide the convenience charging and really providing that ability for people to charge and get rid of their range anxiety. As well, in 2015, we started the partnership of the Nevada Electric Highway with the initial goal of expanding charging infrastructure between our two urban areas, Las Vegas and Reno. So that was electrifying US 95. That project then expanded into phase 2 for all of our interstates and highways for every 50 miles, making sure that Nevadans and quite frankly our tourists could get to all the great places with their electric vehicles. And so phase 2 of that, I believe, is wrapping up this year, which then will expand into our interstate corridor charging program and really utilizing that federal money that Marcy talked about. In 2017, Senate Bill 145 created the Electric Vehicle Charging or Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Demonstration Program, which is our current incentive program, which we'll talk about. In 2019, Senate Bill 299 created the Electric School Bus Program expansion as part of our EVID program that we call. And then this last legislative session earlier this year, Senate Bill 448 created two transportation electrification plans. One is the Economic Recovery Transportation Electrification Plan that was filed on September 1st, approved last week, and then in the consideration and clarification phase right now, which will be on the 13th. So we'll stay tuned for a ton of communication around that about how we can kick that off in the new year. Really excited about that. So just so everybody knows, our current program is the electric vehicle rates. Obviously that TOU is really important as well. Just so you know, that applies to your whole home when it's your residential rate. It's not just for the electric vehicle load. That's probably something we'll look to address in our next plan next year as well. We also have a commercial charging rider for DC fast chargers. On the education, outreach, and services, just so everybody knows, we have an EV calculator on our website that helps you evaluate cars, map out your rides to really see how much energy you will need and make predictions on, or not predictions, recommendations around rates. So if you haven't been to nvenergy.com/EV, I really recommend it. Additionally, we just launched our EV dealership partnership program to help certify EV dealers so that they know how to know about the company's programs, quite frankly, really advancing the EV acquisition process, as well as technical advisory services and just our general education events. As well as incentives, we're really excited for the launch of our lower income electric vehicle incentive. That's in a charger, that's for vehicles, so that's income qualified. That'll be starting in January of 2022, really increasing access to electric vehicles for our lower income customers in historically underserved communities. We also have a residential and multifamily charger incentive, a lower income multifamily charger incentive in partnership with the Governor's Office of Energy, fleet, public, and workplace charging incentives, governmental incentives, again in partnership with the Governor's Office of Energy, as well as our electric school bus program and the Nevada Electric Highway I just told you about. So if you are thinking about an electric vehicle, by all means, certainly come to the website, reach out to us. We're excited to even take this program and expand it even further. So we know that it's happening. We've got programs in place. Last year, we did some market research and also looked at electric vehicle load by the census tract, just so we can understand what the barriers are and what adoption looks like on our grid system. And we're looking to refresh both of those things this year as well, just because a lot of things have changed in the past year. So no surprise to anyone for barriers to electric vehicle adoption for our residential customers, which are local Nevadans, the ability to charge at home, short charging time, low cost to charge, more public chargers, and the ability to charge at work. Many things that the electric utility, obviously NV Energy, can help with as well. Same issues on the commercial side. Some of the things like lower purchase price and things that the OEMs are, quite frankly, actively addressing. We're going to focus on infrastructure and energy. So just so you know, we asked Nevadans, what are they thinking about their next vehicle purchase? And 24% of them said they are likely to get an electric vehicle. Another 28% said they are neutral. So when you start to think about that, that's 50% of Nevadans are thinking that their next vehicle is going to be electric. So I think that data point really should form and frame this conversation when we think as a community how we can start to plan for this. The visual below is just looking at what we see electric vehicle adoption in the next 10 years. And so obviously it's rising, right? And so it's going to happen. I think there's going to see a big boom here in the next couple of years as well. So when we take that electric vehicle load, we also have it by the census tract. And so we can see what that looks like, that growth is on our distribution system and the impact. So as you could probably imagine, the current electric vehicle growth is probably very particular to certain neighborhoods right now. Obviously, the investments we're making in historically underserved communities, we're hoping to change that. But right now, the grid impacts are being seen in very specific areas. But when we think of transportation electrification, just so everybody knows, we plan for it in two different ways. So this isn't new to us. Our sole purpose in life is providing power. So electric vehicles, we plan for it at the macro level in our integrated resource plan. And then we also plan for it at the micro level or at the distribution level to the feeder in our distributed resource plan. So we've been planning for this and also look to use to optimize it in the future. So kind of this grid 101 that Marcy keeps talking about and energy 101, why do we care? Some people think of electric vehicles as just a charger or it's just energy, but really how we plan for energy, transportation electrification is quite an opportunity for us here in Nevada. And so when we look at this, I'm going to look to this as well. So when you look at this orange graph below, this is our supply curve. And so we have to plan for peak. And so when you think of peak, everybody here, I'm preaching to the choir, but I'll use it for practice. So peak is, our peak load in the summer. We're planning for that air conditioning load on our hottest day. Quite frankly, that peak keeps growing. And so we have to build to be able to serve that. But when you think of the rest of the year, you have some excess capacity. And so when you think of transportation electrification load, if we can strategically integrate it off peak, we're actually better utilizing all of our already existing assets. So that's why we have these time of use rates. So we can do this through education and outreach, quite frankly, just helping people understand, right? That, don't charge immediately when you get home, But also there's tariff design, and then there's additionally control technologies. So we did just file for approval in our latest distributed resource plan for a distributed energy resource management system to help us really control whether it's through the vehicle or charging infrastructure to really help move that load and with price signals as well. So that's kind of how, I know when we say it could be to the benefit of all customers, it's not naturally intuitive, but that's really how it works. If we can utilize our already existing assets, it's for the benefit of all customers. So Senate Bill 448. It did three things. It actually repealed our existing electric vehicle infrastructure demonstration program. So that's our EVID program. This next filing next year will be our last year of that program, but it replaced it with bigger programs to really help accelerate transportation electrification. It also created the Economic Recovery Transportation Electrification Plan. That's that $100 million plan that you hear about and we'll talk about here quickly. And then it also created a transportation electrification plan as part of our distributed resource plan. So this will just be our plan going on in perpetuity. And so that will be filed on or before September 1st of 2022, and really looking forward to utilizing this group as stakeholders to see what's needed in that plan to really meet all of our carbon goals around transportation electrification. So just an FYI, the Economic Recovery Transportation Electrification Plan, again, it's almost here. So we're just about through the regulatory process. And as soon as we're through that, certainly be reaching out immediately at the back end. We're getting our implementation plan and website ready so that we can engage with the community and including the actors in this group. So the Economic Recovery Plan, Transportation Electrification Plan, I'll call it, ERTEP, that's our new acronym, is directed solely to accelerate transportation electrification, also with economic recovery and job creation benefits while prioritizing historically underserved communities. It creates 5 programs: the Interstate Corridor Charging Depot Program, the Urban Charging Depot Program, the Public Agency Electric Vehicle Charging Program, of which a component will definitely use this around the community centers that the counties can utilize. Then we have Transit, School Bus, and Transportation Electrification Custom Grant Program as well. And a component of that we're very excited about is the Electric School Bus Vehicle to Grid Trial. And then last but not least, it creates the Outdoor Recreation and Tourism Program to really create that network of charging stations for our tourism economy. So we'll be working on that in short order. And just so you know, from a mapping perspective, going back to that, I think we can definitely in a different meeting talk about and look deep into maps. But from the plan design, we certainly have laid out the infrastructure where our customers currently are, our forecast scenarios, as well as mapping it to historically underserved communities. And so great work to CHISPA, sad that they weren't here at the beginning of this. In the environmental advocacy community, we're very proud and excited that we propose to at least put 51% in historically underserved communities, far exceeding the 40% requirement. And then last but not least, the Transportation Electrification Plan that we talked about, that will be the new plan that we file this year. It's required to be investments or incentives to facilitate deployment of charging infrastructure for all customer classes, but obviously with a focus on residential and multifamily, as well as to facilitate the electrification of public transit and publicly owned vehicle fleets, and to increase access to the use of electricity as a transportation fuel for historically underserved communities. Just to flag everybody here, some key dates on that from the Public Utilities Commission, which is another entity that everyone should start to get used to working with, is the draft regs are out, draft regulations, and any comments are due on December 23rd, and that is docket number 21-06036. And then we will file the plan on or before September 1st of 2021. But from a stakeholder engagement perspective, we certainly plan to use this group as a stakeholder engagement opportunity, and then as well, many other further opportunities will be communicated. So that's all I had planned for today. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's great. And it's incredible just looking at all the work that you're doing, because the utility really does play a large role into how infrastructure is going to be rolled out in our region. So that's exciting. So I'll go ahead and go back to our presentation. And now we'll go ahead and jump into transportation electrification planning goals. And what Marie, had just talked about, I think that plays perfectly into this, because it really gives a good flyover as to where we're going and where we need to go. And so talking about federal EV funding, Maria had touched on this a little bit, the Investment in America Act. So Atlas EV Hub actually pulled out in the Investment in America Act and the Build Back Better Act what the electric vehicle components currently are. This is the total of funding that they came up for both. We know that the Investment in America Act, that was put into public law just in November. The Build Back Better Act is passed the House, but is now in the Senate. But this is really a snapshot as to the types of funding that we would see in the transportation electrification space. Also, what has been really exciting in the electric vehicle industry is just seeing all of the automakers that have been making announcements. You've probably seen a lot of the headlines as to what types of commitments that they're going to be making to transportation electrification. In some cases, it's massive commitments. It's about 40 EV models today, but just in the next few years, we're going to see that grow exponentially with VW. You also see Stellantis there coming out with another 30 vehicles, GM with another 20. Tesla is looking at by 2030 to be at 20 million EVs per year, Daimler, and then all the way down to Nissan. So this just gives you that quick snapshot as to what those transportation efforts look like. So then in thinking about the funding in this particular group, so we've seen kind of what these projections are for electric vehicles. And again, the ones that I just showed are really focused just on that light duty area. So that's not even taking into consideration what is being done for medium and heavy duty. So these regional funding needs that we have here just in our county, when we create our transportation electrification strategic plan. So that is really what's going to help position our region to get these funding dollars. Any scalable projects that we create, Marie had given a list of scalable projects that they're working on. That's also going to bring in additional funding. This funding could be at the federal level, it could also be at the state level, and then also regional level. And that's what we'll be working with this group over the next year to determine all of the ways that we are going to make our transportation electrification efforts as part of the best possible roadmap that we can do. And one example of some types of things that we can consider for our roadmap would be permitting considerations. So consistency among local governments that require EV infrastructure permits. Streamlining the permitting process, standardizing permitting fees for single family homes, multifamily, and commercial. And I'll give you a good example of this. I was working in a region that has 29 different municipalities. And as we were rolling out a $45 million EV charging infrastructure program, and we started going around and talking to the municipalities about what would their permitting process be like, what could their fees be like. We were noticing that, municipalities that were right next door to each other, one was charging, almost $1,000 and the other one was in the low hundreds. And they weren't doing that really on purpose. It was just, they had set their own fees and that was something that they were looking to do. So once we started, working with all the municipalities, we were able to really standardize what that permitting fee was, especially for that investment that is coming outside of the state, but wants to bring that investment for EV infrastructure inside of the state. So that would be typically charging station companies, even working with auto manufacturers, those that are working with large fleets to be able to, get those permits done. This is a example of a EV charging station permitting guidebook that was developed in California. And it really became kind of that guide as to how to standardize, because in many cases you would hear from organizations like EVgo that it was taking more than a year for them to get permitting in California. So that's why things like this were really looked hard at in the beginning. So then going into the strategy inclusions that we would be looking at for the plan that we're looking to develop. So some of the things that we would look at including would be the current and projected EV demand, the projected charging demand for public charging, multifamily, single family, and workplace, and then historically underserved communities. Things for consideration are existing EV infrastructure, recommendations on regional EV infrastructure development needs, recommendations on regional EV infrastructure installation planning, with first a focus on light vehicles, and then also modeling an EV charging ordinance, recommendations around what are some of the components that would go into an ordinance. And then lastly, for some of the inclusions would be information on the costs of the model ordinance and how are these costs distributed, recommendations on input to the PUC. So as Marie just described, all of the efforts that they're doing to work on EV charging infrastructure and to get that installed, what recommendations can we work to the regulating body that's overseeing those efforts, recommendations on strategies for funding or economic workforce development, and then to determine where the EV goals will be housed, especially within different government collaborators. So who's going to be in charge of ensuring that those EV goals are met? And I know that it sounded like from a lot of you who gave your introductions, that you're the ones that are in charge of that. So that's great. And looking forward to seeing that. And then transforming those into actionable policies and programs. And I'll stop there and just see if Marcy, if you had any comments just about that at all so far before we move into Q&A.
Yeah, so thank you, April and Randy and Marie. I think that really helps provide the group a little bit of baseline information to start with. And so, you know, April just went over these features that we hope to include in a regional electrification strategy. And so how we envision this group operating is that April and Randy and her team can help provide some of this analysis, and we can use this working group to vet. Does this seem like it fits? Does this information look complete? Are we missing anything? And that each step in this process will help sort of build out a chapter of the strategy. I think, you know, one thing that the county got started on discussions about an ordinance sort of right out of the gate and I've admitted to all of you, I think, didn't fully appreciate the complexities of what this ordinance would mean, didn't understand some of the cost implications beyond the parcel level. And so this group will really help us sort of build out a strategy that is based on data about current needs and projected needs, and how we time out the development of infrastructure in our community and how that gets paid for, and how can we take advantage of matching up all of these dollars that might be coming from DC to fill these gaps. And you know, maybe an ordinance is a way to fill a part of those gaps, but it sure seems like in all of the work that we've been doing and with Marie's help and Randy and April's help, and hopefully with the help of this working group, we can really understand what our community's charging needs so that we can meet the energy needs of this electrification that's happening, and how do we best match up the resources that are available to get it designed and built and in the ground, and requiring that in new buildings through an ordinance is one way to do that, but it seems like there's an opportunity to take advantage of a whole lot of different ways in which we could get that done. So that's what we're hoping to do with the help of the advisory committee and with the help of the interested parties that are participating in as well, is sort of go together on this journey to create this data, vet it, sort of kick the tires, if you will, build these chapters out, and then hopefully result in a strategy that makes sense for our community, and you know, deliver that to all of the government agencies by the end of next year. So that's sort of the overall vision of what we're hoping. That sounds awfully Pollyanna, and I know there's a couple of you who are thinking that right now. So there'll be space in this working group to, you know, for folks to give all different types of opinions and to come at this from a healthy skepticism about how it's going to impact your organization or your interests. And then as we build out the strategy, we're going to be looking for high level of consensus on what ends up in the document, but leaving space for opposition and You know, if we just can't get to complete unanimity, then at least a strong level of consensus, and to honor transparently those who don't agree with where we might end up. And so, you know, looking to even include entire statements of skepticism or even healthy optimism as to what we come out with. And then we can deliver that to our organizations and kind of set forth how we want to go about implementing this. So that's sort of what we're envisioning using the working group and this process for over the next year or so. So I know we've thrown a lot at everybody. So it's probably a good time to take a breath and entertain some questions if we have any in the chat.
And we don't currently have any questions, so looks like you're doing a great job, Marcy, explaining it.
I think the chat is broken. Oh, I see Greg Lovato raised his hand.
Hi, Marcy.
Hi.
Thanks, April and Randy. So I just wanted to, I guess, give some perspective on, you know, where the state is looking for, you know, future efforts in light duty vehicles and other aspects. And so we are following on Clean Cars Nevada, looking at, you know, the next stage of Advanced Clean Cars 2. We have, you know, a limited time frame this year to evaluate and consider adoption if we're going to achieve that requirement to put it in place before model year 2026. And so because of the more aggressive goals included in what is Advanced Clean Cars 2, it's going to be even more important to have good communication on availability of infrastructure and availability and affordability of electric vehicles, to evaluate those as a part of that. You know, we aren't alone among states outside of California that are going to have to, you know, make some choices about whether, you know, we're ready for that next stage in terms of light duty vehicles. And so it's, you know, understanding a bit where the market's going and is that going to meet the goals that we've set out for ourselves in terms of emissions reductions? Do we need some regulation to ensure that we will have a better chance of meeting those goals? So, you know, we will be, you know, hopefully be able to provide some updates to this group on what Advanced Clean Cars 2 is looking like and what it may mean to the requirements for EV infrastructure and other aspects of transportation electrification. So sorry, it wasn't really a question, but it's going to get harder this year, I guess was the only thing I was saying.
Yes, it is. No, I'm excited, and we're hopeful for the opportunity for this group, like Marie said, to help inform the implementation of the recovery plan, and then also help provide input to the plan that they have due next year. And then, yeah, we've got implementation of Clean Cars Nevada, and then planning for 2. And, you know, we need to be prepared as a community to be able to enable those policies and those plans to go into action. We don't want to be left with a bunch of EVs that don't have any way to get power to them. So, yeah, so we appreciate that. And, you know, we will take all of that feedback, Greg, and you know, if you need agenda time, please let me or April know, and we can get some time set aside in these meetings to have that dialogue.
And Greg, we do have a question for you from Marie Steele as to what would the timing of 2 be?
Yeah, thanks, Marie. So right now it's our understanding that we would need to adopt the regulation by the end of 2022 in order for it to be effective for model year 2026. And that would be the cars that would go on sale in January 2025. And so it's kind of an abbreviated time frame from what we took for Clean Cars, the first one. There's some steps that California Air Resources Board is taking. They're going through public workshops now. They've had a few this year. My understanding is they're planning to take it for their rulemaking at least by June of next year. And then, the timing of when our state would be able to turn that around and then go through a rulemaking process here is something we're still trying to figure out. So it's not only are we on a compressed time frame from when we expect their rulemaking to be in sort of more like final form, but then, answering these broader questions that come into play with these more aggressive percentage sales of zero emission vehicles, it is kind of an additional challenge. And so we're all kind of, I think, with other states trying to figure out how to do it, but we haven't come out with a calendar. We will come out with a calendar. We kind of did that with Clean Cars once we kind of knew what the roadmap looked like. So we'll kind of go backwards from, legislative commission and late in the year, and then sort of try to figure out, what's going to happen between now and then, and we'll share that when we're ready.
Great.
Great. So those are the only questions that we have so far, Marcy.
Anyone else? No other questions? All right. So people are going to get some time back, I think, this afternoon. Oh, question on federal.
Yeah, and I'll just do.
Jason Gray has a question to everyone on federal funds.
Okay.
Hi, Marcy.
Hi.
Hi, everyone. This is Jason Gray from MGM Resorts. Thank you for convening the kickoff, and Marcy, to your team for organizing all of this really important stuff. You guys do great work, so thank you. I just had a quick question for our own edification. I understand there are direct dollars that are coming to the state through the infrastructure bill on EV, and then there are some competitive grant processes that will be, I suppose, coming down the pike. And this is probably an unfair question because all of this is so new, and I'm sure your teams are chasing down information, but the process that you've laid out and the timeline that you've laid out, does it maintain the county and the region and even the state's ability to pursue those competitive grant opportunities that could be coming down the pike? I mean, are the timeframes aligned such that nothing would be missed or opportunities wouldn't be foreclosed upon as a result of a longer term process?
I think it's possible, Jason, that, we're going to be scrambling. There's going to be opportunities that avail themselves. This happens on every funding. It happens, it's happened in every recovery bill. And the feds have these very, very short turnaround times with expectations for these huge, glamorous, regional, well-coordinated, highly impactful projects. So, I think it will be really well positioned later next year through the efforts of this group. But at the very least, we will have a convening body to say, hey, feds just released this. We have an opportunity. Let's get everyone in a room and figure out, of the work we've done so far and of the needs that we've identified, what could we put together and turn this around more quickly? I think there's going to be times we're going to be scrambling and we're not going to be as ready as we want to be is our take on this. Especially earlier on next year, but at least we feel good about having a convening group and a body of people who are identified, and at least some, early analysis is going on to put some projects together that will have a chance of being competitive. And, the more of an opportunity we all have to work together, the better position we'll be. So I don't know, April or Marie, if you guys have other thoughts on that, but that's sort of where the county is coming from.
Hey, Marcy, this is Marco. Can I jump in on that a little bit too? Yeah. So, it's kind of the multi-million-dollar question, but from the city of Las Vegas's standpoint, we've been working with our government affairs staff, and I've had experience with the formula funds for some of the Recovery Act money that came through. We are expecting to have some kind of similar rollout from the federal agencies that are getting money through the IIJA and as well as SB 448. So through some previous planning efforts that we've already done or are in the middle of right now, we're prepared for some of those, earmarked dollars that are going to filter down either through pass-throughs or through competitive grants. An example is the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant. That's something that is funded this time around, and that's something that the county and the largest cities are likely to be recipients of. I already have an idea as to where that's going to go. That's going to line up really well with some of our existing efforts related to solar and EV charging. So we'll probably, coordinate with, our other local agencies as to how they're going to go about doing it. We had a really good process for doing that, with the Recovery Act, and we at least knew what we were doing and shared some lessons learned. We even shared in some procurement opportunities, did joinder agreements and things to that effect. So I think there is an opportunity, especially through a group like this, to join forces and extend our dollars and leverage with SB 448 as much to the extent that we can.
Great. All right, any other questions? Doesn't look like we have anything else in the chat. All right, so we'll just close out with some next steps. So action items, we are going to be circulating a survey to the working group and to the interested parties. And the key things that we want to know from that survey is what transportation electrification efforts are you currently working on, and what efforts might you be working on in the future, because we think that that will give us a really good baseline as to where to start formulating our efforts and to do deeper dives in as we're working on formulating our plan. And then also who in your organization is tasked with the EV charging infrastructure component. We have the meeting schedule here. This is for 2022, and 3 of those meetings will be in person. So right now, the March 10th, June 2nd, and October 6th. And then those will be at the county, correct, Marcy?
Yes.
Yeah.
They'll be here at the Russell Road office in the presentation room, and we'll send out the location details with those invitations.
And so the survey that's going to be coming to you, it's not going to be very long. It has a handful of questions, but again, really the key questions are around those electrification efforts. And then we have our first meeting January 6th, so we know that that's a quick turnaround time, because we at least want to be able to start to share with the group what each of you are working on. So that's why we kept the survey short for you. So we're hoping that you'll be able to provide us that feedback. And that is really it for us. So thanks everyone for joining. This has been fantastic. We will see you all then on January 6th.
Yeah, if you have colleagues or folks that you think should be aware, please feel free to pass along our contact information. We'll make sure they get on the interested parties list. And then I know there's been some questions in the chat and some folks that have sent me questions directly. So we intend on sending all of the working group members and all the interested parties that are on our list the recording and the meeting notes following the meetings, and then we'll also be posting it on the county's website so that, in the event you don't have the email, or if there's someone else you want to share it with, you can always go back and find it on our website as well. So you'll see that stuff go out probably about a week after each meeting or so.
Thanks, guys.
Very good.
Thank you all very much.
See you next time.
Thanks, all.
Thank you.